The black void of space stretched endlessly before Captain Ethan Cole, broken only by the soft glow of distant stars. His ship, the Star Hunter, floated helplessly, smoke rising from its damaged engines. Sparks flickered from the control panel as warning lights blinked in desperate urgency. Ethan gritted his teeth, gripping the controls with steady hands. His heart pounded. The pirate ambush had been sudden and brutal. 1 second, he was cruising through the Zelfar expanse, and the next, his ship was under fire. He had fought back, but he was outnumbered. And now, his only choice was to crash land on the nearest planet. "Come on, baby. Hold together," Ethan muttered, trying to stabilize the ship, but the controls barely responded. The planet below, a green and blue world with swirling clouds, grew larger on the screen. The moment his ship hit the atmosphere, turbulence shook the cockpit violently. Ethan's body slammed against the seatbelt, and alarms screamed in his ears. Flames licked at the edges of the glass as gravity pulled him down like an invisible hand. Then, impact. The Star Hunter crashed through a dense jungle, metal screeching as it tore through trees. The force threw Ethan forward, and everything went dark. A cool breeze brushed against Ethan's face. He groaned, his body aching from head to toe. Slowly, he forced his eyes open. The cracked glass of his helmet revealed a lush alien jungle. Bioluminescent plants cast an eerie blue glow, their soft lights pulsing like breathing creatures. Strange, distant sounds echoed through the thick air, somewhere between a song and a whisper. Ethan winced as he unbuckled himself and pushed the broken cockpit door open. His ship was a wreck. Flames flickered from one side, and smoke curled into the sky. He wouldn't be leaving this planet anytime soon. His first priority: survival. Grabbing a small emergency pack, Ethan stumbled out of the wreckage. His body protested with every step, but he forced himself to move forward. He scanned the jungle, looking for anything useful: a water source, shelter, food. Then he felt it. A presence. Something, someone, was watching him. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to stay alert. His hand moved to the small pulse gun strapped to his belt. Slowly, he turned and froze. She stood a few feet away, half hidden behind glowing vines. A woman, but not human. She was tall and slender, with smooth, pale skin that shimmered faintly in the low light. Her hair, long and flowing, seemed almost weightless, drifting gently as if moved by an unseen breeze. But it was her eyes that held him still, large, glowing green, filled with an otherworldly wisdom and hesitation. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan swallowed, his pulse racing. He had seen many alien species in his travels, but nothing like her. There was something different about her presence, something almost unreal. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with the same curiosity he felt toward her. Then, in a soft, melodic voice, she spoke. "You are not of this world." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected her to speak his language, even if it was slightly accented. He nodded, forcing himself to stay calm. "No, my ship crashed. I didn't mean to come here." The woman stepped closer, moving gracefully, as if she barely touched the ground. "You are injured," she observed. Her glowing eyes flickered to his torn sleeve, where blood seeped from a gash on his arm. Ethan exhaled sharply. "I've had worse." She regarded him for a moment, then lifted a delicate hand. A faint blue light swirled around her fingertips. Ethan tensed. "What are you?" Before he could finish, the energy drifted toward him like mist, wrapping around his wound. A cool, soothing sensation replaced the pain, and before his eyes, the cut closed. The skin knitted back together, leaving only a faint scar. Ethan stared in shock. "That's impossible." The woman simply lowered her hand. "Not impossible, just different." Ethan finally found his voice. "Who are you?" She hesitated, then spoke, her voice softer this time. "My name is Lyriel." For the first time, she looked away, as if she were afraid of what would come next. And you should not be here. Ethan frowned. Why? Lyriel's glowing eyes met his once more. Because my people will kill you if they find you. Ethan's mind raced. The alien woman, Lyriel, stood before him, her glowing green eyes filled with something between concern and fear. Her words echoed in his ears. My people will kill you if they find you. Ethan had faced danger before. Pirates, bounty hunters, hostile alien creatures. But something about the way she said it made his stomach twist. Still, he forced a smirk. Not exactly the warmest welcome. Lyriel didn't smile. She glanced toward the dense jungle, her movements tense, as if expecting something, or someone, to appear. You must come with me, she said suddenly. If they find you here, it will be too late. Ethan hesitated. He didn't know her, didn't know if he could trust her. But he also didn't have many options. His ship was wrecked. He had no idea where he was. And if what she said was true, he was already in danger. After a brief moment of thought, he nodded. Lead the way. Lyriel turned, moving swiftly through the glowing jungle. Ethan followed, doing his best to keep up. The air was thick with strange scents, some sweet, some sharp and metallic. The plants around them pulsed with soft blue and purple lights, as if the forest itself was alive. As they moved, Ethan spoke, trying to understand his situation. Who exactly are your people? Lyriel didn't look back. We are called the Veilari. We have lived on this world for thousands of years, hidden from outsiders. Ethan frowned. Hidden. Why? She hesitated. Because the universe is dangerous. My people believe isolation is the only way to survive. Ethan scoffed. Hiding doesn't make you safe. It just makes you a bigger target when someone finally finds you. Lyriel finally turned to face him, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. And yet your people fight and conquer, always chasing more. You spread across the stars, leaving destruction behind. Ethan sighed. He'd heard this before. Many alien species saw humanity as reckless, always pushing into new territories, always expanding. Not all of us are like that, he said. I'm just an explorer. I didn't come here to cause trouble. Lyriel studied him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she continued walking. They traveled for what felt like hours, the jungle growing thicker and darker. Ethan could barely see, but Lyriel moved with ease, as if the forest itself guided her steps. Eventually, they reached a hidden cave, covered in glowing vines. Lyriel pushed them aside and stepped in, motioning for Ethan to follow. Inside, the air was cool, the walls lined with strange, flowing symbols that pulsed faintly. Small orbs of blue light hovered near the ceiling, casting a soft glow. This is a safe place, Lyriel said, kneeling beside a small pool of crystal-clear water. You can rest here. Ethan sighed, sitting on a smooth rock. His body ached from the crash, and exhaustion pulled at him. As he removed his damaged jacket, he watched Lyriel. She moved gracefully, but there was something off. Her breath was slightly uneven, and a faint shimmer of sweat coated her skin. You okay? Ethan asked. Lyriel hesitated. I used too much energy healing you. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. I didn't ask you to do that. No, she said softly. But I couldn't let you suffer. Her words struck something deep inside him. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Then, Ethan asked, why are you helping me? If your people hate outsiders, wouldn't it be easier to let me die? Lyriel looked away. Because I see something different in you. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? She hesitated before answering. Most species that find us seek power. They want our technology, our knowledge. But you only wanted to survive. You do not look at me with hunger for what I can give you. Ethan exhaled, leaning back against the cave wall. I just want to get off this planet alive. Lyriel nodded. Then you must leave soon. If the High Council learns of you, they will send the enforcers. Ethan sat up. Enforcers. They are the protectors of my people, Lyriel explained. Powerful warriors with abilities far beyond mine. If they find you, they will show no mercy. Ethan rubbed his face. Great, just what I needed. Lyriel stood, her expression serious. You should sleep. Tomorrow, I will find a way to help you. Ethan wanted to argue, but his body begged for rest. He nodded and leaned back, closing his eyes. As he drifted into sleep, one thought lingered in his mind. Why was she risking everything for him? Meanwhile, deep within the capital of the Velari, a tall figure stood before a glowing screen, watching the jungle through a hovering drone. A deep voice echoed through the chamber. A human has been found. The hooded figure narrowed his glowing eyes. Send the enforcers. No outsider must leave this planet alive. Ethan woke to the sound of distant thunder. For a moment, he forgot where he was. The cool air of the cave, the soft glow of the strange floating lights, the scent of something floral yet unfamiliar, it was all alien to him. Then, the memories rush back. The crash. Lyriel. The warning about the enforcers. He sat up quickly. Lyriel was near the entrance of the cave, her figure bathed in soft blue light from the jungle outside. She was tense, listening. Ethan stood, his muscles aching. What is it? Lyriel turned to him, her glowing green eyes sharp. They are coming. A chill ran through Ethan's spine. How do you know? Lyriel didn't answer right away. Instead, she closed her eyes and took a slow breath. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, as if reaching beyond the walls of the cave. I can feel them. Ethan frowned. Feel them? Lyriel nodded. The enforcers are powerful. They use the energy of the world itself to sense all who walk upon it. I was trained to do the same, though my strength is far less than theirs. Ethan exhaled. And what do you sense? Lyriel opened her eyes, and for the first time, Ethan saw fear in them. They are close. Ethan immediately grabbed his emergency pack and slung it over his shoulder. Then we need to move. Now. Lyriel hesitated, then nodded. She stepped outside first, scanning the glowing jungle before motioning for him to follow. As they moved, Ethan couldn't shake the tension creeping up his spine. The jungle was beautiful, but eerily silent. No distant hum of creatures. No rustling of unseen animals. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Lyriel suddenly stopped, her hand raised. Ethan froze. Then he heard it. A low, rhythmic thrum in the air, like a pulse traveling through the ground itself. The sound wasn't coming from a single direction. It was everywhere. Lyriel turned to him, her voice urgent. They have locked onto us. Run. Ethan didn't hesitate. He sprinted after Lyriel as she weaved through the glowing trees. The jungle around them seemed to come alive, shifting and pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. Ethan could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching, hunting. Then, a blast of energy tore through the trees behind them, missing Ethan by inches. The force sent him stumbling forward, rolling onto the damp ground. Ethan looked up just in time to see them. The enforcers. 3 figures emerged from the jungle, their presence suffocating. They were taller than Lyriel, clad in sleek black armor with glowing blue lines pulsing along their bodies. Their faces were hidden behind smooth, reflective helmets, and in their hands they wielded energy blades that crackled with raw power. One of them, the tallest, stepped forward and spoke in a deep, commanding voice. Outsider, surrender and your death will be swift. Ethan pushed himself up, heart pounding. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. The enforcer tilted his head slightly. You cannot escape. Ethan glanced at Lyriel. She was breathing heavily, her hands glowing faintly with the same energy she had used to heal him before. Then, without warning, she raised her hands and slammed them to the ground. A shockwave of blue light erupted around them, sending the enforcers staggering back for a brief second. That was all the time they had. Run, Lyriel shouted. Ethan didn't argue. He turned and sprinted, Lyriel right beside him. The enforcers recovered instantly. Ethan heard the crackle of energy weapons firing, and suddenly, the ground exploded beside him, sending dirt and glowing plant matter flying into the air. Lyriel grabbed his wrist, pulling him toward a thick wall of vines. This way. They crashed through the dense foliage and stumbled onto a steep cliffside. Below, a massive river of glowing blue water churned, stretching endlessly into the misty horizon. Ethan glanced back. The enforcers were already closing in. "No time," Lyriel said, her voice filled with urgency. Ethan followed her gaze and his stomach dropped. She wanted to jump. "You're crazy," he said. Lyriel's eyes glowed fiercely. "Do you trust me?" Ethan hesitated for only a second. Then he nodded. Lyriel grabbed his hand, and they jumped. The wind roared in Ethan's ears as they plunged toward the glowing river below. The last thing he saw before they hit the water was the enforcers standing at the cliff's edge, watching, waiting. Ethan barely had time to take a breath before he and Lyriel crashed into the river below. The water wasn't like anything he had ever felt before. It was warm, almost electric, as if tiny pulses of energy danced across his skin. The glowing blue currents pulled him down, and for a moment, disoriented in the strange liquid, he couldn't tell which way was up. Then, a soft hand grabbed his wrist. Lyriel, her glowing green eyes cut through the water, filled with urgency. She pointed upward, and Ethan kicked hard, following her lead. They broke through the surface, gasping for air. The river was wide, its shimmering waters stretching into the distance, bordered by towering cliffs and dense alien vegetation. The sky above was darker now, streaked with swirling violet clouds. Lyriel glanced up at the cliff where they had jumped. The enforcers were gone. They didn't follow. Ethan coughed, treading water. "They will," Lyriel said, "but they will take another path. They will try to trap us instead." Ethan sighed. "Great. Any more bad news?" Lyriel didn't answer. Instead, she motioned toward the riverbank. "We must keep moving." Ethan followed her, swimming to the shore. The river's glow faded as they climbed onto dry land, their clothes dripping with the strange blue water. Lyriel took a deep breath, closing her eyes. Ethan watched as the faint glow around her body flickered. She was exhausted. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but he wasn't convinced. "You used a lot of energy back there," he said. "Healing me, slowing down the enforcers. What does that do to you?" Lyriel hesitated before answering. "Using my power drains me. If I use too much, I'd weaken." Ethan frowned. "Then maybe you should stop saving me every 5 minutes." Lyriel gave a small smile, but it was tired. "I could say the same to you." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Fair enough." But he could tell she was struggling. And they weren't safe yet. They moved quickly through the jungle, deeper into the unknown. The sounds of strange creatures echoed around them, but none dared come too close. After a while, Lyriel led Ethan into a hidden cave, tucked behind thick vines. Inside, glowing crystals pulsed faintly, filling the space with soft light. "This place," Ethan said, looking around. "It looks like that first cave you took me to." Lyriel nodded. "Many of our sacred places are hidden like this. This one has been abandoned for a long time." Ethan sat down on a smooth rock, stretching his sore muscles. "Okay. Now that we're not running for our lives, what's the plan?" Lyriel was silent for a moment. Then she spoke softly. "There is only one way off this planet." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "There is an ancient gateway," she said. "A portal hidden deep in the mountains. It is the only thing that connects our world to the stars." Ethan's heart leaped. A way out. A way back to his ship, to civilization. But then he noticed Lyriel's expression. "You don't look happy about this," he said. Lyriel hesitated. "Because it is forbidden." Ethan sighed. "Of course it is. Lyriel sat down across from him. Long ago, my people used the gateway to explore other worlds. But then, something happened. We saw too much. We realized the dangers beyond our world. So the council sealed the portal, swearing never to open it again. Ethan frowned. And the enforcers. They were created to ensure the promise was never broken. Ethan rubbed his face. So let me guess, if they catch us near the gateway, they will not let you leave, Lyriel said. And I will be seen as a traitor. The weight of her words hung between them. Ethan watched her carefully. Why are you doing this, Lyriel? Why risk everything to help me? Lyriel looked down. Because I do not believe my people are right to hide. I have always felt that there is more to the universe than fear. And you. She met his gaze, her glowing eyes filled with something Ethan couldn't quite define. You are proof of that. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had been in dangerous situations before. But this was different. Before he could respond, a low vibration filled the air. Lyriel's eyes widened. They're here. Ethan stood, grabbing his pack. They found us already. Lyriel nodded. We must go. Now. She turned, leading him through a hidden tunnel at the back of the cave. As they moved, Ethan's mind raced. The ancient gateway. The enforcers closing in. And Lyriel, an alien girl who was risking everything for him. One way or another, this would end soon. And not everyone would survive. The tunnel was narrow and damp, its walls lined with faintly glowing roots. Ethan and Lyriel moved quickly, their footsteps echoing softly as they hurried deeper into the unknown. The low vibrations that signaled the presence of the enforcers were growing stronger. They're getting closer, Ethan said, glancing over his shoulder. Lyriel nodded, her expression tense. They are tracking our energy. They will not stop until they find us. Ethan gritted his teeth. Then we need to move faster. Lyriel led him through the winding passage, her glowing eyes scanning ahead. The tunnel twisted and turned, eventually opening into a large underground cavern. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. In the center of the cavern stood a massive stone bridge, stretching over an abyss of swirling blue mist. On the other side was a towering archway, covered in glowing symbols that pulsed softly in the darkness. Lyriel pointed. The gateway. Ethan felt a surge of hope. They were close. If they could reach it, he might actually have a chance to escape. But as they stepped onto the bridge, a deep, commanding voice echoed through the cavern. You cannot leave. Ethan froze. On the other side of the bridge, 3 enforcers emerged from the shadows, their black armor reflecting the glow of the gateway. Their leader, the tallest of the 3, raised a hand. Energy crackled around his palm, forming a deadly spear of light. Lyriel's grip on Ethan's arm tightened. Run. Ethan didn't argue. They sprinted across the bridge, but the enforcers were faster. With a single motion, the leader hurled his energy spear forward. Lyriel shoved Ethan aside just as the spear slammed into the stone. The impact sent a shockwave through the bridge, cracking the ancient stone beneath their feet. Ethan hit the ground hard, coughing from the dust. He turned to Lyriel, panic surging through him. Are you okay? She nodded, but he could see the strain on her face. The enforcers advanced, their energy blades humming dangerously. Lyriel took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her hands glowed brighter, the lights surrounding her forming into swirling patterns of blue and white. The enforcer leader narrowed his eyes. You betray your own kind, Lyriel. Lyriel stood tall. Our people are wrong to hide. The universe is not our enemy. The leader raised his blade. You are a fool. Ethan clenched his fists. He didn't understand the full depth of Lyriel's power, but he knew one thing. She couldn't fight them alone. He grabbed a broken piece of stone and hurled it at the nearest enforcer. It struck the warrior's helmet with a loud clang, making him stagger slightly. Not exactly a fair fight, is it? Ethan said, stepping beside Lyriel. She glanced at him, surprised. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Ethan interrupted. "We get through this together." Lyriel's eyes softened for a moment, but then the enforcers attacked. The battle was fast and brutal. Lyriel moved with incredible grace, her glowing energy forming shields and blades that clashed against the enforcers' weapons. She blocked a strike from one attacker, then spun, sending a blast of energy into another. Ethan, meanwhile, had to rely on speed and instinct. He ducked under a swing, grabbed a loose stone, and slammed it into an enforcer's knee. The warrior staggered, giving Ethan just enough time to dodge another attack. But the enforcers were too strong. One of them caught Lyriel off guard, slashing across her arm. She cried out, falling to one knee. "Lyriel!" Ethan shouted, rushing to her side. The enforcer leader loomed over them, his blade raised high. "This ends now." Boom! A shockwave suddenly erupted from the gateway. The glowing symbols pulsed violently, and the archway began to hum with immense power. Ethan shielded his eyes. "What's happening?" Lyriel's breathing was ragged. "The gateway. It senses us. It is awakening." The enforcers hesitated, their focus shifting toward the now glowing portal. Lyriel gripped Ethan's hand. "Now's our chance. We must go. Now." Ethan didn't waste a second. With their last bit of strength, they ran toward the gateway. The enforcers recovered, but it was too late. As Ethan and Lyriel reached the glowing archway, the entire cavern shook violently. The swirling mist in the abyss rose, engulfing everything in blinding light. Ethan felt a strange pull, as if his very body was being lifted from the ground. He tightened his grip on Lyriel's hand, afraid to let go. Then, everything vanished. For a moment, there was only light. Ethan felt weightless, his body suspended in a swirling vortex of energy. Colors he couldn't name danced around him, and a strange humming filled his ears. He gripped Lyriel's hand tightly, afraid that if he let go, they would be separated forever. Then suddenly, the world snapped back into place. Ethan hit the ground hard, gasping as cool air rushed into his lungs. He coughed, pushing himself up on shaky arms. The sensation of weightlessness faded, replaced by the familiar pull of gravity. Beside him, Lyriel groaned softly, blinking as she sat up. Ethan looked around. They were no longer in the cavern. Instead, they stood in the middle of a vast stone courtyard, surrounded by towering ancient structures covered in glowing symbols. The sky above them was dark purple, filled with distant, flickering stars. Strange floating lights drifted lazily through the air, casting a soft glow over the ruins. Ethan exhaled. "Where are we?" Lyriel's eyes widened as she scanned their surroundings. "This is..." She hesitated, her voice almost a whisper. "The Lost Sanctuary." Ethan frowned. "Lost Sanctuary." Lyriel stood, brushing dust from her clothes. "It was a place of knowledge. A place where my ancestors once studied the stars and the paths between worlds. But it was abandoned long ago." Ethan looked at the towering ruins around them. The air itself felt ancient, as if the place had been waiting for centuries for someone to return. "So," he said, rubbing his sore arm, "this wasn't exactly where we were supposed to go." Lyriel shook her head. "The gateway is unpredictable. It brought us somewhere safe, but not where we expected." Ethan sighed. "Great, and the enforcers?" Lyriel's expression darkened. "They will find a way. The gateway might have delayed them, but they will come." Ethan looked around, trying to spot an exit. "Then we need to move before that happens." Lyriel hesitated. Her gaze was fixed on a massive stone doorway at the far end of the courtyard. Unlike the ruins around them, the door was intact, its surface covered in glowing blue lines that pulsed softly. "There," she said, pointing. "That is the sanctuary's core. If there are any records left, they will be inside." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And that helps us how?" Lyriel turned to him, her eyes shining. The sanctuary was built by those who first used the gateway. If there is any knowledge here, it might show us how to escape for good. Ethan nodded. Then let's go. They approached the massive doorway cautiously. As they neared, the glowing blue lines on the stone shifted, rearranging into new patterns. The air around them hummed with unseen energy. Lyriel took a deep breath, then raised her hand and pressed it against the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire structure rumbled. The blue light flashed brightly, and with a deep, ancient groan, the massive doors began to slide open. Ethan shielded his eyes as a brilliant white light spilled from within. The air inside smelled fresh, untouched by time. Slowly, they stepped forward. The room beyond was breathtaking. Massive crystal pillars lined the chamber, their surfaces reflecting the soft glow of an enormous holographic star map floating in the air. The ceiling was high, disappearing into shadows, and along the walls, stone pedestals held ancient artifacts, small metallic objects, glowing spheres, and strange, unreadable texts. Lyriel's breath caught. It's all still here. Ethan glanced around. Looks like a museum for ancient aliens. Lyriel ignored him, stepping toward the floating star map. The moment she approached, the glowing lines shifted, revealing moving pathways between planets. Symbols flickered in the air, changing as if responding to her presence. Ethan crossed his arms. So, do you know how to read any of this? Lyriel hesitated, reaching out. As her fingers brushed the light, the holographic symbols rearranged themselves again, forming recognizable patterns of energy flow. She gasped. It's a map of the gateways. Ethan's eyes widened. You mean, like, other portals, other exits? Lyriel nodded, excitement growing in her voice. Yes, there are more than one. The enforcers only guarded the one on my homeworld, but here. She traced a glowing pathway with her hand. There's another gateway, far from their reach. Ethan grinned. So that's our ticket out. Lyriel's smile faded slightly. Maybe, but I don't know if it still works. This place has been abandoned for centuries. Ethan exhaled. Well, it's not like we have many options. Before Lyriel could respond, a distant explosion rocked the ruins. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The floating star map flickered, and a low vibration filled the chamber. Ethan's stomach dropped. Let me guess. Lyriel's voice was urgent. They found us. Ethan clenched his fists. We just can't catch a break, can we? Lyriel grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the far end of the chamber. Come on. If we can reach the second gateway, we might still have a chance. Ethan ran beside her, ignoring the pounding in his chest. Behind them, the entrance to the sanctuary's core exploded inward, and the enforcers stepped through the dust and rubble. Their blades of energy glowed like fire. Their cold, merciless eyes locked onto their targets, and they began the hunt once more. The ground trembled beneath their feet as Ethan and Lyriel sprinted through the ancient sanctuary. Behind them, the enforcers stormed through the ruined halls, their energy blades glowing in the dim light. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. The cold, merciless figures were gaining on them. They moved with unnatural speed, their armor gleaming under the flickering lights of the ancient ruins. Lyriel led the way, her glowing eyes scanning the symbols along the walls. We're close, she said, breathless. Ethan's lungs burned. Close to what? Lyriel pointed ahead. A massive archway, similar to the first gateway but larger, stood at the end of the corridor. Unlike the other one, this gateway's symbols were dim, its energy weak. Ethan felt his stomach sink. It's broken, isn't it? Lyriel skidded to a stop before the archway, placing both hands against the cold stone. She closed her eyes, and the symbols on the surface flickered weakly, as if trying to wake from centuries of slumber. It's not broken, she said. Just asleep. Ethan turned as the enforcers rounded the corner. They raised their weapons, their leader stepping forward with deadly precision. You cannot escape, the leader said. his voice like ice. Lyriel's hands glowed brighter, her energy flowing into the gateway. But Ethan could see the strain on her face. She was weakening. Ethan stepped between her and the enforcers. His heart pounded, but he clenched his fists. "If you want her," he said, "you'll have to go through me." The enforcer leader tilted his head. Foolish. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a blast of energy straight at Ethan. Ethan barely had time to react before the blast slammed into him, sending him flying backward. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding through his ribs. Lyriel cried out, "Ethan!" The enforcers advanced, their weapons raised for the final strike. But then, the gateway came to life. A blinding pulse of blue light erupted from the archway, sending a shockwave through the entire sanctuary. The enforcers staggered back, shielding their eyes. Lyriel stood in the center of the glow, her entire body shining with energy. The ancient symbols on the gateway flared to full brightness, and the air shimmered with raw power. She turned to Ethan, her face filled with sorrow. "This gateway requires a sacrifice," she whispered. Ethan's eyes widened. "What?" "No, there has to be another way." Lyriel stepped toward him, gently placing a hand on his chest. Warmth spread through him, soothing his pain. "This world, this universe, needs you," she said softly. "You are proof that we don't have to live in fear, that we can change." Ethan shook his head. "No, we do this together." Lyriel smiled, her eyes filled with both sadness and hope. "You once asked me why I saved you, why I risked everything." Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah." Lyriel's fingers trembled against his skin. "Because I believed in you." Before Ethan could respond, she turned toward the gateway. The enforcers, realizing what was happening, lunged forward, but it was too late. With a final burst of radiant energy, Lyriel merged with the gateway. Her form dissolved into pure light, flowing into the ancient machine. The entire structure shook violently, and the archway blazed with power. Ethan felt a powerful force pulling him forward. He reached out, but Lyriel was already gone. Then, everything turned white. A new beginning. Ethan gasped as he landed on solid ground. His vision blurred, his body tingling with leftover energy. The air smelled fresh. The sky above was blue. He was back on Earth. He sat up, his heart pounding. The ruins, the enforcers, the sanctuary, all gone. The only proof that it had ever happened was the faint blue glow still flickering on his fingertips. Ethan clenched his hands, feeling a strange energy inside him. Lyriel had saved him, but she was gone. He looked toward the sky, his chest tight. "I won't waste this," he whispered. Somewhere, out there in the universe, the enforcers still ruled. There were still battles to fight, still wrongs to right. And he would carry Lyriel's light forward. For her, for humanity, for hope.